Hello there, friends, and welcome to another episode of Wednesday Whimsy. My name is Kyle, and Wednesday Whimsy is a short show that I do every Wednesday evening where I talk about a board game, a top 10 list, a board game related topic, something that's been on my mind, whatever it happens to be. Usually we try and wrap it up in 20 minutes, but sometimes we don't. Anyway, this time is going to be a little bit more free form. So I went recently, and by recently I mean last week, I went to the Dice Tower Retreat. Now this is a small game convention. I don't know how many people are there. I think it's maybe in the 150 range. So it's a pretty small group, no children, all sort of adults. Generally, what we would call high level gamers, meaning people who can really handle everything and are familiar with game terms and generally pleasant to play with. We all meet in a hotel convention center. This time it was in Miami. Next time it'll be in Orlando, and play games for several days in a row. And that's really it. If you go to some conventions, there are events, there are vendors, there are demos, various things that you can do. Sometimes there's a show. Not here. Here they do an announcement every day, and that's about it. And it's just games. It's all games all the time. The library opens when the convention opens, and it closes, on the last day. And pretty much around the clock, you'll find somebody in the game room ready to play a game. And it was technically my first time going. Now, I didn't feel like a first-timer because I've gone to the cruise for many years, and I've gone to a variety of other Dice Tower events. So this didn't feel new, and I registered for it in prior years. I just had been unable to attend due to other events. So it was kind of my first time. And I thought this week on Wednesday Whimsy, what I'd talk about is some things I liked, some things I liked less, and also then go through the highlights, the best games that I played at the Dice Tower Retreat. So let's start with what I liked about it. The first thing I liked is I just loved the people that were there. As I mentioned earlier, it was what we might consider high-level gamers, people who are pretty into board games. It's kind of a more expensive convention, so it's going to weed out sort of the casual outsiders, and really just be the people who are there who want to play all the games. And that's really nice because I tend, look, when I go to a convention, usually I go with somebody I know. And so I didn't know anybody there, but I did know that everybody there would be somebody that would be able to play pretty much anything that I wanted to. And that was really quite a relief. The convention has a flag system. Now, other Dice Tower events have this as well, but where they'll have yellow flags and green flags. And the yellow flag means you're looking for someone to teach you the game, and the green flag means you're looking for someone to play the game with you. And if you don't know what to do, you just look for a flag and you go over and see what's there. And that's kind of what I did. I mean, I ended up teaching a lot of games because I know a lot of games, and I know how to teach them, in a reasonably understandable manner. And so I taught a few games, but I played even more. Another thing that I loved was they do have one event, and that's the key lime pie night. Basically, they bought a whole bunch of fancy key lime pies. They had 4 flavors. They had a mango one, a raspberry white chocolate one, a regular one, and a disgusting watermelon one that I didn't go near because watermelons are a horrible thing. But the rest of them were very enticing, and they were very good, very good quality key lime pie. So you just sort of, when they announce it, you just go and have some, and that was fun. I also really like the library. It's the same library as is on the cruise, which is a well-curated library with pretty much any game most people would want to play. They do a good job at weeding out things that people aren't really interested in. Now, there are some games there that I would argue probably aren't right for that setting. Like, a game like Oathsworn, for example, might just be too big for a convention like that. Yet it's in the library, or some of the I don't know, Giant Small World, or some of those larger games. I'm not sure that they get played very much. But hey, it's not my library. I don't have to carry them back and forth. And I love that they're there. They had new games, old games, and I played a combination of those. I mean, I just tried really anything I wanted to, and it was delightful. Another thing that I really liked is I found the way the game room was run to be one of the better library experiences. On the cruise, for example, you have to like swipe your badge to take a game out, and that's because people will be taking them everywhere, and they obviously want to keep track of where they are. But here, you just pulled it off the shelf, set it up, and you were done. I mean, you put it back when you were finished. There was really not any level of involvement. You could just go to. They only had two games that were set up kind of out there for anyone to try. They had Unmatched Tales to Amaze, and they had, which got played all the time, and they had Dark Tower, which didn't get played as much, and that's largely because you need an electronic device to play it. And I thought, ooh, that sounds like fun, but then I thought, my iPad's upstairs. I don't want to go get it. So yeah, that's kind of a it's not a fault in the game, but it did cause it not to get played as much as it could have been. So, what did I like a little bit less about the convention? Well, there's not much. One thing is the location that it was at was kind of not really near anything. So, when it was time to eat, there were some restaurants at the hotel, but hotel restaurants usually aren't all that great. So, and then you go on into Uber Eats, and it was just McDonald's and Burger King and Popeyes. It just didn't seem like there was anything all that great to eat, and I found that to be a little bit underwhelming. I wish that there had been a better selection of food or things to do other than games. Now, I didn't want to do anything other than games, but I wanted to be able to go out and buy a drink or something, and there really wasn't the ability to do that. It's ordering food is not all that great. I wish that there had been that. And then I guess a neutral is how this thing is sized. I know people who would love to go, but they keep the attendee list really small, and they sell to, I guess, past customers first. And what that means is that if you're hearing about this and thinking, "Oh, that sounds amazing," you might not be able to get in. It's not exclusive, but they sort of they do let people who've been there come back, and so as long as all those people renew, well, there won't be very many tickets that are available to people who did not. So, I mean, I have friends that I think would really really dig this event, but I can't invite them just because I don't know if they will be able to get a ticket. So those are some things I liked a little bit less. Another thing I really did enjoy, they have this game exchange, which is kind of a fun thing. I mean, people brought in lots of old games, new games, and they just sort of sat around in this huge stack. I mean, it was a huge stack of games. And then on the last day, or I guess the second to last day, they took everybody's badge and just drew them randomly. And when you got called, you got to go in there and take anything you wanted. And they went all the way through, and then they turned around and went backwards. So if you were called later, you didn't get the super cool stuff, but you might get, two things that you kind of wanted. Now with me, it's kind of difficult because I have a lot of games, and so it's kind of hard for me to find things that I'll be interested in an event like that. But I found something. I got the new printing press game, which is the smaller version of Gutenberg, and I'm kind of excited about that. I've played it now, and it's a fun game, and it's something I might not have picked up had it not been on the prize table. So I really enjoyed the game exchange. And so now let's go into the well, let me talk about my days there. So I would wake up at like 4:30 to 5 every day and get ready, have a shower, get dressed, and go down to the game room and be there at about 5:30. And there was usually a small group of people that would congregate about that time. Tom Vassell from the Dice Tower would be there, and about 4 or 5 other kind of hardcore gamers. And so, you kind of start the day with them. And then I would often just pick a game that I wanted to learn and set it up, and I would, I'd take the player's wanted flag, but I'd leave it lying down because I don't want to have somebody watch me read the rule book. But as soon as it was ready, I'd put it up, and I was able to find somebody to play with in usually not very much time at all. And then I would just play the games all throughout the day. And then at around 11-ish, I would decide it was time to go upstairs and go to bed. It really would depend on what I was doing. But if I'm getting up at 5, then 11 is kind of the end of the day for me. And that's that. All right, so now we're going to talk about the games. These are not in any particular order other than the number 1. Well, I guess I would say the number 1, 2, and 3 probably are in their proper place. I'm going to talk about some of the games I played. I'm going to tell about some of the good ones, and then some of the not so good ones as well. And that's a good thing about this, because you can go there and try things and save yourself some time and money and getting some games that, after playing them, you probably might not buy them. So let's start with, I played a game called Ancient Knowledge, and I could tell there was a game there. It just wasn't really coming out. It's this little card game where you're playing these monuments, and they have these bad tokens, and then over time you can move them off or play other effects, and then eventually they roll off this track, and you'll score them at the end of the game. I was really kind of lukewarm on that one. And that's probably the least enjoyable game that I played there of new stuff. So I don't know that one's worth running out for in any means. And now let's talk about some good things. I played a game. I'd wanted to play the Stefan Feld game, Marrakesh. So this was one that came out on Kickstarter with Queen Games, and they were selling it for a ridiculous price. It was, I think, in the $150 to $200 range on their Kickstarter. And if you were to buy it now, sort of after the fact, it's still close to between $100 and $120, depending on where you buy it. You might get it for a little less. But I was like, well, let me try this one, because Stefan Feld games, they tend to feel kind of the same. And I wanted to try this one to see if it was really worth the effort. And actually, I set it up, and my initial impression was that game has everything in it. I mean, every possible mechanism that could be in there was in there. And the game definitely has a lot of mechanisms for mechanism's sake. But if I were to find it on sale, I'd probably buy it, because I had a good time with it. It had some annoying features, but you're throwing these little pillars into a tower, kind of like a cube tower, and then you're going to draft them from this pool, and then you'll try to fill up these areas and then select some actions and do the actions based upon how many of those pillars are in the area. So I found it to be enjoyable. World Wonders, new game from Arcane Wonders, coming out. It's a Brazilian game, and it's sort of a polyomino type game where you're filling up your board, and you're trying to meet these conditions to build these monuments, which are things like the pyramids, the Great Wall of China, whatever they are. This was a Portuguese copy, but it didn't really matter. It had rules in English, and the game itself is pretty simple. I found it to be pretty enjoyable. I just hope the English rules in the production copy are a little bit better. Some of the things really required a bit of interpretation. So I had a great time with it. I played it a couple of times. It's very light. It's very fast. It's easy to teach. It'll work well for a lot of people. I think it'll be a big hit when it comes out. I just hope that it'll have really clean rules, because the rules in the box were not very clean. I played a prototype game. They had one guy was there kind of pimping his game, and it was called RAAS, RAAS, Dance of Love or something, and it was about kind of Bollywood dancing. And he was teaching it, and we played a 5-player version. And that the thought of that just sort of made me think maybe I'll excuse myself. But I'm glad I stuck with it, because at 5 players it was just fine. I mean, it was simultaneous action selection. Basically, there was this wheel, and it had, I think, 6 little wheels on the side, and you would kind of turn them by selecting them, and then you were choosing actions based upon the color of the die that you were selecting. You were trying to, do board game stuff and get the most points possible. They were supposed to be dancers, And then, if there were ever dice that lined up that were the same color or same number, and you picked that wheel, well, then you might go up this bonus track. I enjoyed it. I think it's being published. Nobody told me this specifically, but based on context clues, I think Arcane Wonders might be doing it. And I think it's worth the effort. I think it was an enjoyable game. I do hope that the final production will use plastic or wood rather than cardboard for those gears, because having those work is really kind of key to the game. But I found it to be an enjoyable. I don't normally do a lot of prototype games, but this one, I'm glad I gave it a try. The next one I played was one that I hoped I would not like, and that was Deep Rock Galactic. This is a huge miniatures game, and it's based on some video game that I had never heard of before. But basically, you have these four dwarves, and they're in a mine, and they're running around trying to find stuff, right? You'll have missions, and there's objectives. Kind of the cool thing about this game is when you have this board you set up, and when you get to the edge of the board, you can knock down walls to kind of carve your own path. And that was kind of an interesting thing. The game is pretty fast, pretty simple as a co-op game, and I think it'll actually be a lot of fun to play and mess around with a variety of people. I had a great time with it. So it was kind of a failure because I was hoping it would be terrible, and it actually turned out to be pretty good. All right. Emerge. It's kind of Gods Love Dinosaurs or Gods Hate Dinosaurs, whichever one that was, but with building land. So you're rolling dice, you're manipulating them using some special abilities, and you're trying to build these islands and populate them with different meeples. Thematically, it was meh, but the game itself was pretty enjoyable. I had a good time with it. I don't think I need to buy it, but I thought it was fun enough to play, and it's one that I would like to try again. Let's see, and then we're getting into kind of the top tier games. The first one I'll talk about is Life of the Amazonia, and this was a little bag building game where you pretty much that's what you're doing, right? You're trying to. It kind of felt like Ecos, the continent game, that bingo style one, but with bag building. And so you would, you're buying these chips, putting them in a bag, pulling them out, and trying to, buy the right things. You've got this tableau of animals, which are these cute meeples, and you're trying to put them in your areas where they will score. Maybe the monkey wants to be in the same habitat with all the animals, or the otter wants to be just in water and have the water be as big as possible. And everyone had his own unique animal as well. I thought it was a really clean game. The rules were super straightforward. I thought it was going to be complicated, but once we got in, one round in, we knew what we were doing. I think it was a Kickstarter, and I think buying it is going to be expensive. But I had a good time with it. Again, not sure I need to pick it up, but I'm glad I tried it. It kind of approached it from a different perspective, and it was pretty enjoyable. Life of the Amazonia. And now we're going to the top three. Each of these was amazing, and I would love to play them again. The first of the top three is Sky Team. So Sky Team is a small two-player game where you are a pilot and you're working with another pilot trying to land a plane. Now, for whatever reason, you're not supposed to talk to each other. You're rolling dice and assigning them to this board. I found the base scenario to be pretty easy, but you can make it. There's a whole lot of ways to modify it, a whole lot of extra challenges to add in, and it's a good little cooperative game that does not take long. The rules are super simple. You explain them and you're ready to go. And I could see with a friend of mine just playing through this thing a lot in a row and having a good time. I could also see it being a good travel game because it's in a pretty small box. Sky Team was a thumbs up. The next one was Unmatched Tales to Amaze. Now, I already like Unmatched quite a lot, and this is the cooperative version. And it was there, it was all set up, and I was like, well, let's try it. And I played it several times, actually, because it was just always sitting out there. It comes with 4 fighters that you can play in regular Unmatched. It also, you can also just, you can also play with your other Unmatched people in this game. But you have some sort of a cooperative monster you're trying to fight, and it has life based on the number of players. There's one side that's the Mothman, one side that's an alien. You're trying to prevent them from their schemes, and it does sort of a what's that game I like? Aeon's End, where you don't know the turn order. You're going to shuffle out these turn order cards, And so, you might have a couple turns in a row, or you might have the bad guy going several times in a row. I found it to be delightful. It is going to be a great way to play unmatched, especially solo. I think playing it solo is going to be a real delight. The only complaint I have is it comes with only those 2 scenarios, and I think it probably needs about 10. I think it needs about 10 of these cooperative bad guys. They seem pretty easy to implement, and Unmatched has been pretty good at getting more content out. I just think if they can get up to 10 villains, the game will be just perfect. I can see myself getting bored of just the base 2. But regardless, it comes with 4 new fighters. I played with 3 of the 4. I played with the Golden Bat, who's some Japanese superhero, Nikola Tesla, who's Nikola Tesla, and some gadget girl, Dr. Jill something or other, who has this gun that she can shoot, or she can flip it to this health potion, and based upon what opponents are playing, she can get bonuses. Dr. Jill Trent, that was her name. And then there was another one that I didn't end up having a chance to play with. But I'll play with it when it arrives, because I've ordered that one through the Kickstarter. I'm really excited for it to come. And then comes the most played game at Dice Tower Convention, Retreat. This was a game that I had already ordered from Boards and Dice, and I was really excited to play. I'd heard that it was kind of like Barrage, and when I saw it there, I was like, oh, I didn't know that was out. The game is called Nucleum. Now, what they had there was more of a prototype version. It was not the best quality by any means, but it was a final prototype. I think they had just not been able to get the final version over to the convention in time, and they wanted people to be able to try it, and I'm sure glad they did. It's a heavy game. It has a lot going on. You are trying to supply power to buildings. You're trying to take either uranium or coal and turn it into power, and then power your buildings to get various scoring opportunities. And I'll probably do a Wednesday Whimsy just talking about it at some point once I get the game. But it fired for me. It was amazing. I remember the first time I played it, about a third of the way in, I played it 2-player. We learned from the rule book with this terrible quality prototype, and both the guys playing with and me said this is just one of the best games. And we played it. I mean, I played it with him a couple of times, and then I just played it with everybody. I would just carry it around. I would set it down. I'd set it up because I knew people wanted to learn it, and it's a pretty imposing game. And I was happy to play it and teach it and play it and teach it. I'll say that I played it at 2, 3, and 4, and 2 is my favorite because it's really quite snappy. Your turns are like that. Ooh, at 2 players, you can knock it out in just over an hour, and it is a very satisfying hour. At 3 and 4, especially with new players, it can drag a bit, but it's even playing it at 4 players, I did not notice the time. Nucleum is really firing. I mean, it is a fantastic game. Probably one of my favorite games of the year. Definitely something that would go into my top 100 list, or might when I do it. But Nucleum was the game of the con for me, and I'm really sad that I don't have a copy to play right now, because I definitely would. Anyway, those are some of the games I played. I've got a little frog in my throat apparently. Apologies for that. But those are some of the games I played and some of my thoughts about the Dice Tower Retreat. I thought it was a fantastic event. I've already reserved my spot for next year because Dice Tower Retreat is one of the better conventions. It's kind of like the original cruise before the cruise got a little too big, because it was just really people who wanted to play games. And that's kind of what I've got for you. So I'm going to end it there. I'm not going to spin on just for the sake of going on, but I will. I'll wish you safe travels and courage when you need it, and I'll see you back next week for another episode of Wednesday Whimsy. Bye-bye.